First thing is to understand exactly what your rights are under the law. So they're so dramatically changed from what they were that if you don't appreciate the full extent of the authority you've been granted, you will be undervaluing the process and not correctly appreciating just how much you can accomplish if you want to. Secondly, I think it's important to identify goals. In the past, we've been largely reactive. We've been defensive, and we've tried to protect whatever it is we had from being changed in a way that we didn't agree with. Now I think we're in a different role altogether, and we can chart a future and achieve those goals much more readily than we ever could in the past. And finally, I think it's important to understand that whatever you do will have an impact upon employees. They're the means by which we carry out our mission to educate students. If we aren't mindful and respectful of that relationship that we have with them, regardless of the fact that we may spend our money perhaps in a way that we think is wiser than it was before, we may have a discontented teaching staff, and that could be very detrimental to education. Well, the districts that I've seen that have been successful are ones that have regular meetings with leaders of the Education Association, or at least the teacher group. And when I say regular meetings, I don't really mean board meetings so much, although board members could be involved in those discussions. I think instead board members should expect their academic leaders, the superintendent and principals, to have those meetings. I think when those meetings are conducted regularly and the employees correctly perceive that their input is being valued, you can accomplish a great deal more than just having one meeting once a year and saying, okay, we're going to change some things, what do you think about it? The strength that you derive from having regular conversations and establishing your bona fides, your credibility, is really incalculable. It's also the basis upon which you can predicate all of the success you achieve or don't achieve going forward. Well, the usual ones. The legislature has unfortunately not been able to provide us with enough revenue to cover all of our needs. So for the vast majority of districts, we operate with fewer financial resources than we would like to have. So that's number one. And secondly, of course, you have a change in the law which has been viewed by many people as upsetting. And I'm talking in particular about employees. So you have people who, on the employee side of the table, are very fearful about how the world is going to change around them and what their place in that world will be. It's difficult to allay fears when you're saying to the employees, yes, we're going to take this language out of the collective bargaining agreement and put it in a handbook, but we're not going to change it. We may honestly believe on our side of the table that that's not threatening at all. We should understand on the other side of the table it will be viewed as threatening, even though the language may not be changed in the slightest. And that's because once it's out of the collective bargaining agreement, it can be changed. You have to understand the law in order to understand how you behave in the bargaining process. You have to know what your rights are, what the rights of the other party are, and you have to know how the process works if you fail to get an agreement. In other words, what does arbitration look like? Arbitration, to a very large degree, will influence the bargaining that you do. You have to know what the outcome will be in the event you fail to reach a voluntary agreement. So that's critical, to understand the law, understand the rules. And then I think you have to really revert to what has been the key to all successful negotiations since I started many years ago, and that is building good relationships. Well, I don't think it's really that complicated. I think you start with the proposition that everybody brings value to the table, unless they demonstrate to the contrary. So if you value every single employee without regard to what it is they do, and they know you value them, and you respect what it is they do, whatever that contribution might be, whether they're the teacher or an administrator or they're a cook or a custodian or a bus driver, they know that. That will really pay dividends long term. And you can't just know it, you have to demonstrate it. So how do you demonstrate it? You demonstrate it in part by the policies you adopt, but you also demonstrate it by how you reach out and communicate with them. It is amazing how, in some cases, employees are very well treated in a substantive sense, and yet don't feel appreciated because they don't have that connection.